"We don't serve vagrants. Please leave the building," the security guard snapped, shoving the frail old man standing silently at the entrance. His red beret nearly slipped from his hand as he trembled. Slightly, no one stepped forward, not a single glance of sympathy. He said nothing, just lowered his head and turned away down the cold marble steps. But no one inside City Hall could have known. Just minutes later, a military helicopter touched down on the roof, carrying direct orders from the Pentagon. "And would you have stood up or turned away like the rest?" The clock on Elmsworth City Hall struck 9 on Tuesday morning, its chimes echoing across the small Montana town square. Frost still clung to the edges of sidewalks, despite the strengthening March sun, and most of the shops were just beginning to open their doors for the day. Ed Hale stood at the bottom of the wide City Hall steps, gathering his resolve before ascending. At 83, even small climbs required preparation. His thin frame, wrapped in a weathered jacket with frayed cuffs, seemed almost too fragile for the Montana wind that whipped around the building's corners. In one hand, he clutched a red beret, not as a fashion statement, but as part of an identity that ran deeper than his visible poverty. In the other, he held an envelope yellowed with age, its edges soft from years of handling Dot for the 30th consecutive year. Ed had come to submit a petition for a memorial to honor the 7 men from his unit who had died at Kissen in 1968. 30 years of rejections hadn't deterred him. Each March 10th found him here, document in hand, determined to keep a promise made decades ago in a jungle halfway around the world. The main security desk sat just inside the grand entrance, staffed today by Tommy Matthews, a fresh-faced 22-year-old, with a new uniform and an abundance of unearned authority. Tommy had been working at City Hall for just 3 months, having taken the job after dropping out of community college. He looked up from his phone as the door opened, immediately assessing Ed's disheveled appearance with unconcealed disapproval. Ed approached the desk with military bearing that his aged body couldn't quite fulfill, standing as straight as his curved spine would allow. "Good morning," he said, voice clear despite his years. "I'm here to submit this petition to the city planning office." Tommy barely glanced at the envelope. "Do you have an appointment?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "No, but this is a standing submission. They know me upstairs," Ed explained patiently. Tommy's face hardened. "Sir, you can't just walk in without an appointment. This isn't a shelter. You'll need to leave, son." "I'm not looking for shelter," Ed replied, reaching slowly into his pocket. "I'm a veteran with official business. Here's my ID." But as he extended his hand with a card, Tommy made a dismissive gesture that caught Ed's shoulder, just firmly enough to unbalance him. The red beret tumbled from his grasp onto the polished floor, and in his attempt to catch it, the veteran's ID card slipped from his pocket as well. "Anyone can print those cards nowadays," Tommy said with a smirk. "We get people claiming to be veterans all the time," from a nearby bench. A well-dressed woman waiting for an appointment looked up from her phone and laughed softly. "I thought soldiers were supposed to be respected," she commented to no one in particular, her voice carrying in the marble lobby. Ed stood motionless for a moment, the indignity of the situation washing over him. Round the lobby, a few people glanced his way before quickly looking down or aside, unwilling to involve themselves. Near the elevator, a man in a business suit whispered to his companion, still clinging to old glory at his age, unlike many men his age who might have responded with anger or hurt. Ed remained silent. Decades of military discipline had taught him when to fight and when to retreat strategically. He simply bent down with considerable effort to retrieve his fallen beret and ID card, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he tucked them back into his jacket. Tommy, perhaps expecting an argument, seemed almost disappointed by Ed's quiet dignity. "You'll need to make a proper appointment through official channels," he said, turning back to his phone. "There's a number you can call." Ed nodded once, acknowledging the instruction without accepting its underlying dismissal. As he turned to leave, he reached into an inner pocket and withdrew a small black card embossed with gold lettering. Moving to a quiet corner of the lobby, he pulled out an ancient flip phone and dialed a number from memory. "This is Staff Sergeant Hale," he said quietly, his voice suddenly firm with purpose. Activate tier red. Restore the names. Tommy, watching from his desk, shook his head slightly. They really think they're still soldiers, he muttered to another employee passing by. What no one in the Elmsworth City Hall realized as they went about their Tuesday business was that within 8 hours, the roof of their building would vibrate with the arrival of a military helicopter whose presence would forever change their quiet Montana town. What do you think? He whispered. Comment passed, code or respect. Linda Tress adjusted the microphone on her desk at the Elmsworth Community Radio Station, preparing for her weekly segment on local history. At 59, she had become something of an unofficial town historian, though few knew her personal connection to the story that had exploded across social media. Overnight, before we discuss what happened at City Hall, she began, speaking to her listeners with the measured cadence that had made her program so popular. I think it's important to understand who Edward Hale is, not just what he appears to be. Linda had known Ed Hale her entire life, though most of her early memories were of a distant figure who appeared at her family's door once a year, always on her father's birthday, always with the same quiet respect. It wasn't until she was in college, pursuing a journalism degree, that she learned the full story of the connection between this weathered man and her father, whom she'd never known. Edward Hale served as a communications sergeant at Kayachi during the Vietnam War. She explained to her listeners, specifically during the siege of 1968, 77 days of hell that most history books only mention in passing, Ed had been part of. A forward signal team responsible for maintaining communication between isolated units and command headquarters when North Vietnamese forces surrounded the American base. His team became crucial to survival. Without their radio links, artillery support and medical evacuations would have been impossible. The Alpha Communications unit started with 8 men, Linda continued, her voice softening. By day 40 of the siege, Ed Hale was the only one still alive. She had visited Ed's small house on the outskirts of town years ago, seeking information about her father for a personal project. What she found was a man living in dignified poverty, his small veteran's pension barely covering essentials. He had declined regular benefits, accepting only medical care for injuries sustained during service. He showed me photographs that day, Linda recalled for her audience, not the official military ones, but personal snapshots taken by the men themselves. My father, Robert Trass, standing beside Ed, both of them impossibly young, cigarettes dangling from tired smiles. When the Alpha Communications bunker took a direct hit, Ed had been outside running a new line to a damaged antenna. He returned to find his entire team either dead or dying. Despite orders to maintain his position, he organized a rescue effort, leading a medical team through active fire to recover the bodies of his fallen comrades. One of those men was my father, Linda said, her professional composure momentarily wavering. According to Ed, Dad was still alive when they reached him, but died during the extraction attempt. He had enough time to hand out a blood-stained letter meant for my mother. That letter, the one Ed had delivered to Linda's mother all those years ago, had become the template for his annual petition. Each year, on March 10th, the anniversary of the bunker attack, Ed would walk the 3 miles from his home to City Hall, regardless of weather, to submit his request for a memorial. He never asked for recognition for himself, Linda explained. The petition was always about those 7 men, honoring a promise he made to ensure they wouldn't be forgotten. Each year, the petition would disappear into bureaucratic channels, eventually returning with a form letter citing budget constraints, zoning issues, or procedural complications. Each year, Ed would simply nod, file the rejection, and begin preparing next year's submission. He maintained a simple daily routine that local residents had grown accustomed to over decades. Rising at 5 each morning, he would raise an American flag outside his modest home, meticulously folding the previous day's flag with military precision. He kept his yard immaculate despite his age, grew vegetables that he often shared with neighbors, and read voraciously from the town library. He doesn't use social media, Linda told her listeners, doesn't complain to the press, doesn't attend political rallies. His form of activism is simply persistence, showing up year after year with quiet dignity. During their interview years ago, Linda had asked Ed why he continued his seemingly futile petition efforts when the outcome never changed. "He told me something I've never forgotten," she said. He said, "They died doing their duty. The least I can do is keep showing up for mine." The envelope Ed had been carrying yesterday, the one dismissed so casually by the security guard, contained the original petition with its 7 signatures collected before the fatal attack, including her father's. The paper bore faint brown stains that Linda knew were blood. Attached was a photograph of the 8-man team standing together outside their bunker. Just days before the attack, on the back, each man had written his name and hometown, with Elmsworth, Montana, appearing 3 times. He never wanted praise, Linda concluded, her voice steady once more. He only wanted those 7 men not to be forgotten. Would you recognize a hero without a uniform? Type always, sometimes, or never, at 8 p.m., as darkness settled over. Elmsworth, the night security team at City Hall, had just completed their first rounds. 2 guards manned the quiet building, one stationed at the front desk, another monitoring security cameras from a small office on the ground floor. The first indication that something unusual was happening came when the motion-activated lights on the roof suddenly illuminated. Initially dismissed as a malfunction, or perhaps birds triggering the sensors, the guards grew concerned when the lights remained on and a distant, rhythmic thumping sound became audible. "Check the roof cameras," the senior guard instructed his colleague, reaching for the phone to alert local police as a precaution. The roof camera feed showed nothing at first, just the empty helipad that had been installed during renovations a decade ago, but never used. Then, entering the frame with military precision, a US-60 Black Hawk helicopter appeared, its rotors slicing through the night air as it executed a textbook landing. "Holy shit," the junior guard whispered, fumbling for his phone to record what was happening. "Should we evacuate?" Before his colleague could respond, the secure line at the front desk rang, a phone that had never rung in either man's tenure at the building. "City Hall security," the senior guard answered tentatively. "This is Brigadier General Howard Granger, United States Army," came a crisp response. "We are conducting authorized operations on your roof. You will power down all recording devices immediately and provide access to the building." Confirmation code Echo November 472. Bewildered, the guards watched on the monitor as 6 individuals disembarked from the helicopter. For war, military uniforms, while 2 were in dark suits that screamed federal agency. Leading them was a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and the unmistakable bearing of high command. Within minutes, they were inside the building, presenting credentials that the security team had no basis to question. General Granger carried 2 items, an official-looking document bearing defense department seals and what appeared to be a laminated scan of an old, stained letter. "We need the mayor and city council here at 0700 hours tomorrow," Granger stated. "Not a request, but a directive. All of them. Is that understood?" By morning, word had spread throughout Elmsworth that something extraordinary had happened at City Hall. Citizens gathered outside the building, watching as council members and the mayor arrived, their faces showing confusion and concern. Local police maintained a perimeter, themselves unclear about who had authorized their deployment. At exactly 7 a.m., Mayor Henderson and the full council were seated in the main chamber, a room normally used only for scheduled public meetings. General Granger stood at the podium, the morning light from tall windows illuminating his dress uniform and the rows of decorations it bore. Beside him, to everyone's surprise, stood Ed Hale, his thin frame somehow straighter today, his red beret positioned with perfect military precision on his white hair. "Yesterday," General Granger began without preamble, "you turned away a decorated combat veteran who has submitted the same petition for 30 years. The silence in the room was absolute as Granger fixed his gaze on each council member in turn. Staff Sergeant Edward Hale was awarded the Silver Star for actions at Kissin. That saved 23 American lives. His communication team, call sign Alpha, maintained critical links during the heaviest fighting of the Vietnam War. Despite sustaining casualties that would have broken most units, Granger lifted the laminated document. This letter, written by Private First Class Robert Trask as he lay dying, contains final wishes that have legal standing under Military Code Section 14.7b, specifically that the men of Alpha Team be remembered. In their hometown, the general then read aloud the names of the 7 fallen soldiers, their ages none older than 24 and their hometowns. 3 had been from Elmsworth, 2 from neighboring towns, and 2 from elsewhere in Montana. I am here today, Granger continued, to inform you that the Department of Defense has reviewed Sergeant Hale's petition and the 30 years of rejections it has received. I have also reviewed the 132 similar memorials that have been approved across this country for units with fewer casualties and less distinguished service records. He placed a document on the table before the mayor. This is an executive order signed by the Secretary of Defense, authorizing the immediate construction of a memorial to the Alpha Communications team on federal grounds. Should the city of Elmsworth wish to participate in this process, you may. Should you choose not to, the memorial will still be constructed, with or without your cooperation, and will be permanently protected under federal statute. Ed Hale stood silently as the general spoke, his eyes fixed on a point in the distance, as if seeing something or someone invisible to everyone else in the room. Mayor Henderson, visibly shaken, reached for the document. General, I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Our city values veterans. Your city, Granger interrupted, has rejected this petition 30 times. Your security staff physically removed Sergeant Hale from the premises yesterday. Any misunderstanding lies entirely with Elmsworth, not with the Department of Defense. No. Media, no apology, just orders, then silence and a standing ovation. What would you do if you were there? Type honor, chills, or justice. The security footage of the helicopter landing, surreptitiously recorded by the junior guard despite orders to cease all recording, found its way online by morning, posted first to TikTok with the simple caption, "Pentagon lands at our city hall, Woutif." It accumulated 12 million views within 24 hours. As details emerged about why military officials had descended on a small Montana town, social media exploded with reactions. The hashtags #HaleStrong and #Forgotten but Not Gone trended on Twitter, spawning thousands of conversations about veteran treatment, bureaucratic indifference, and the power of persistence. National news organizations scrambled to piece together the story, sending reporters to Elmsworth, where they encountered a community in the midst of profound self-examination. Many residents expressed shame at having seen Ed around town for years without ever knowing his story or the significance of his annual city hall visits. "I just thought he was another eccentric old-timer," admitted Francine Miller, who had operated the coffee shop across from City Hall for 15 years. "He'd come in for coffee after being turned away, always polite, never complained. I had no idea he was fighting for something so important." The impact rippled far beyond Elmsworth. Within days, city governments across the country began reviewing their own pending memorial requests and veteran-related petitions. In at least 27 cities, long-dormant proposals were suddenly expedited, with officials publicly citing the Elmsworth incident as a catalyst for change. A grassroots movement called Restore the Names emerged, with volunteers helping veterans navigate bureaucratic systems to ensure proper recognition for fallen comrades. Historians and archivists offered pro bono services to document and preserve stories that might otherwise be lost to time. Local schools incorporated the story into their curricula, with Elmsworth High School creating a special history project to document the lives of the 7 Alpha team members. Students conducted interviews with surviving relatives, researched military records, and created multimedia presentations that humanized the names that would soon be carved in stone. Perhaps the most poignant moment came a week after the incident, when Tommy Matthews, the security guard who had turned Ed away, appeared at the veteran's modest home, carrying a sealed envelope. He approached the porch where Ed sat, reading in the afternoon sun. "Mr. Hale," Tommy began, his voice unsteady, "I came to apologize, but also to thank you. Ed looked up, recognition dawning slowly. He gestured to an empty chair, inviting the young man to sit. "My father was with Alpha Team 2, Tommy continued, extending the envelope. "Not your unit, but the one that relieved you after what happened. He told me stories about the old man who kept the radios working when everything went to hell. I never made the connection until I saw your name on the news." Ed accepted the envelope, opening it carefully to reveal a faded photograph of young soldiers standing beside communications equipment. "Your father was Daniel Matthews," he said quietly, not a question, but a statement of recognition. Tommy nodded, tears forming. "He said you saved him once when a line needed repair under fire. Said you volunteered when no one else would. I've been turning away the man who saved my dad's life." That evening, Tommy posted his own story online, adding another dimension to the narrative spreading across the country. His post ended with words that would be quoted repeatedly in the days that followed. "Sometimes we forget that history isn't just in books. Sometimes it's standing right in front of us, waiting to be recognized." The impact on younger generations proved particularly profound. A 7th grade student named Melissa Carter wrote an essay that won the state competition and was read aloud at the memorial groundbreaking ceremony. "I don't know what war is like, but now I understand why Mr. Oh, it's not about him being a soldier once. It's about honoring those who served." When construction began on the memorial, it featured a bronze sculpture depicting 7 young men gathered around a radio set. The design included an empty space. The sculptor explained that this represented not absence, but ongoing presence, the survivor who carried their memory forward. The monument would stand directly in front of City Hall, the very place where Ed had been turned away countless times, ensuring that everyone who entered the building would pass between the silent, bronze sentinels of Alpha Team. Has someone's quiet dignity ever changed you? Comment yes, working on it, or need more examples. As seasons changed in Elmsworth, Ed Hale's routine remained a quiet rhythm. He still rose at 5 each morning, still swept his porch with meticulous care, still sat reading in his chair beside the carefully maintained flagpole. But now, from that chair, he could see the memorial 7 years to create. 7 bronze figures stood in eternal formation, their names and stories finally anchored in public. Behind them, a stone wall bore the inscription he had specified in his very first petition. "Not everyone who came home survived, but those who did carry the memories of those who remained behind." The memorial quickly became a destination, not just for locals, but also for veterans and military families from across the country. They came quietly, often leaving small tokens, unit patches, dried flowers, or poppies flowers, a single bottle of whiskey with 1 small cup. Tangible acknowledgments, recognizes of a brotherhood that transcended time. A young woman approached one autumn afternoon as Ed sat in his customary spot, reading in her weathered hands. She carried a small, black simple card with red lettering, which she placed carefully at the base of the central figure. "My grandfather mentioned you before he was my father," she said quietly, turning to Ed with eyes that reflected both sorrow and respect. "He served with you at Alpha Team. I'm here today to honor." Such visitors became regular, each bringing pieces of a larger story that Ed had preserved through sheer determination. Children from local schools made weekly trips to the memorial, their visits learning about not just about warfare, but also about persistence, the quiet courage required to keep promises. Across decades, on the first anniversary of the helicopter landing, a special ceremony was held at the memorial site. As darkness fell, residents gathered with candles, creating a circle of light around platform for sharing stories about those who had served. At precisely 8 p.m., the sound of distant rotors appeared over the horizon. The same Black Hawk helicopter appeared, executing a ceremonial flyover of the monument site. As it passed low over the site, something fluttered down, a single wreath, made of red poppies, landing perfectly at the center of the monument site. Ed stood at attention. Despite his years, his weathered hand raised in salute, the red beret perfectly positioned. As the aircraft faded into the distance, he continued to stand, as if honoring those who had gone before. The community around him maintained a respectful silence, their presence a quiet acknowledgement of the memories he carried so long. As he lowered his hand and turned to leave, a reporter asked if he felt vindicated after all these years. Ed considered the question carefully before responding. "They didn't build this for me," he said at last, gesturing toward the people gathered. "They built it so that those who come after those who don't have to shout to be heard. If you believe one soldier's quiet voice can still move mountains and even bring down helicopters, then this is why we exist. We share stories that prove quiet dignity is louder than applause." Subscribe to see more touching tales of those who honor those who never ask for anything except themselves to be remembered.